Hey everyone, so I didn't think I would be doing a video this close back to back, but there's a few things I wanted to talk about today that sort of sprung to mind, and I wanted to iterate on them on camera so I can put this, as a flagpole. First of all, we're in pink today. I don't really wear colours. I usually wear black, white, tan. If it's not black, white, tan, brown. Dark green, really showing my military background here, aren't I? Navy blue. That's like I look more like private security than a creative person usually. But if not, then it's usually pink. I quite like the color pink. I don't understand why it's got this sort of feminine. I know it's cultural, but not in Asia really. I just think it's a nice color. Nice pastel, and I got plenty of pink items, so, off topic, I suppose. Well, not really off topic, we're talking about the Renaissance man here, and I don't mean, the woke ally. I'm talking about the definition of a polymath, of an expert at more than one thing. It's not a jack of all trades, an expert of multiple trades, and I feel like that sort of image is not really there anymore for the male. I feel like men are very underserved in the current climate in terms of realistic idols or mentors. I feel like they sort of push to the extremes consistently, and as someone who, I won't say I was at the extreme ends, but who has consistently operated at the higher end of things, be it with my time in the army, or be it when I was into motorsports, and like now the technology we were using then is rudimentary, but it was radical at the time. I've always been at the front lines in photography. Like I didn't settle for just being a wedding photographer. I think that I've got quite a unique point of view on this, because I don't feel like I'm extremist in any sense of the word. Maybe it's because I've always been pushing and doing that I've not felt the need to project an image or anything, but I do feel now as a man in Western society, even though I'm in the East, everything I do is sort of Western facing. I feel like men are scrutinized beyond what's normal, and beyond what's really acceptable. But that's not the point of this video. This video is regarding the Renaissance man and the polymath. And we're going to go and talk about off the cuff my feelings about this. I had a shave. This is actually what's considered attractive in Thailand. I can't stand it. I like a little bit of growth. I like to be a little bit scraggly. I really don't enjoy being clean shaven. And I'm still looking for a good hairdresser, but I'm hoping that the sides will grow out a little bit so that they can cut it into something that isn't, short back and sides, too long. I don't really want that. I want something that's sort of cohesive, so I'm waiting for that to happen. But I don't know, I really hurt my arm last night, but it gets like this. It's probably because of the storm last night, but there's stuff I've done in my past and my body isn't exactly fully functional. But yeah, my arm's really killing me today, but that's just life. We just deal with it. And again, this sort of comes it's generational, maybe I think it's generational. My mum's like this too. I mean, she just gets on with it. I just get on with it. Other people would be like, if this was Dow, if this was my partner, she'd be in the what's it called, what they even called in the hospital, but she'd be seeing the doctor and letting him know that she has a bad arm. So I think it's generational. In the entertainment industry, there used to be a thing called the triple threat. Michael Jackson is the defining example of a triple threat. And a triple threat in the entertainment industry is you can sing, you can dance, and you can write music, or you can act. that's usually what the triple threat is later on. Is you can act, isn't it? Sing, dance, act, and usually you will have a writer or producer behind you. But anyway, it's the same sort of deal. It's a polymath, right? And I feel like that's exactly what I want to be, but as a creative. And if I had to draw the parallel, I think that for a creative to be, you know, a triple threat in modern entertainment, say, I think it is. You need to be able to write, you need to be able to draw, and you need to be able to write music. I think that if you can do those things, you can do almost anything. I think that, you know, all doors are then kind of open to you, and I've kind of got a leg up. I haven't learned how to draw, but obviously I know photography and I know the concepts, basic concepts of art, as well as in-depth concepts of art. But that's another story entirely. We're not going into that today either. The point is, I think that I'm kind of weaker than I would like to be in the other areas, where I think that, you know, I'm okay with music, but I've never been able to really latch onto it the way I latched onto a camera. And I can write. There's no doubt about that. I can write. But I don't think that my passion is in writing. I feel like I'm more reliant on a visual medium than I am on a conceptual medium, and that is a creative muscle that I would like to build. That is something I don't want to atrophy. I do feel like that's something that I do want to continue with, but at the same time, it's not exactly taking a back seat. But if I'm learning Danish, if I'm learning Japanese, there's going to be a point in time where, like, do I want my writing to be in English? And if I'm based in Japan, I see my future being in Japan, then isn't it more likely that I would want to embrace that? And this is where the concept of the polymath, of the polyglot, of the Renaissance man comes in. Like, and there's a part of me that wants to read Dazai in Japanese, or, you know, anything really, like the manga that I love, like, you know, I would love to see what Monster is like in Japanese. I think that would be a brilliant, you know, or even Murakami. I feel like you have to understand. Like, I've read a little bit of Murakami. I'm not a huge Murakami fan, but I feel like you have to understand the culture. And the same with manga, like, you know, reading stuff like Nichigahara Holograph by Inio Asano. You really have to have an understanding of the culture and where this comes from to be able to read past the lines. Whereas in English, there's a saying, you know, you read between the lines. I think that for media literacy, you have to be able to read past the lines. So, you know, these are concepts that are floating around in my brain, in my skull, that I don't know exactly how I'm going to articulate them or how they're going to go about, but I feel like that this is the first step, you know. And I think that a lot of people in this world are saying, I want to be whatever it is they want to be, and then they follow a template. They say you do A, B, C, and you arrive at D. But the problem is, and we've seen this with millennials, right? We've seen this, and Gen X to a certain extent. You were promised, you go to school, you do a job, you get a profession, you're looked after. But that totally collapsed. Absolutely fundamentally collapsed. Like the convent between the unspoken rule of you do A, B, and you get C fell apart, but people are still clinging to that. They still want an A, B to C, and I don't really think that really has much value in this coming world, where I believe that a lot of the basics will be automated. Whether it's automated better or worse is not a question anymore. It will be automated. You know, I think that, you know, these people who are in charge, they will hire an AI for $5 a month or whatever it is to write their copy. They will not hire a social media accountant or whatever it's called, account manager, or like the lower tier down from that, even social media assistant, whatever, even for like 1,600, 2 grand a month. Why would they, in their mind? Like, there has to be a serious deficit between engagement or sales for them to even consider that as a proposition. And I don't think that it's going to affect the top end. I think the top end is always going to gravitate towards handmade, boutique, unique, artisanal. They're not paying for the product so much. Like Prada just employed Hideo Kojima and Nicholas Winding Refn to do an installation, and they don't really care so much about. They're not telling them, we need these people because they're the only people who can make C. They're paying for A and B, and C is what they get. And I think that there's a fundamental disconnect between a lot of people who want to sort of break in and understanding that, and that doesn't happen overnight. Like, you just look at Hideo Kojima, for instance. His career spans, almost 50 years, I think. It does not happen overnight. You cannot become an expert overnight, and I think at some point you just have to sort of understand that, and you deal with it. You figure it out. You either figure out a way to make it work, or it doesn't work, and you understand that it's just going to take time because you're building a certain skill set. It's like you don't enter a race until the car is ready. It's the same here, really. You wait until you figured out the platform before you build on it, and it's not until that platform is ready that you really send it out to sea, right? So that brings me all the way back around to this idea of the Renaissance man, and I don't really know when the last time that sort of was a thing, really, but I really do believe that that's where we're heading. I think that there's going to be a call for the Renaissance man, for the man that has expertise in various different things, the musician that can direct, and this is the other thing, like, a lot of people who are already known for one thing tend to how can I put it, they don't want to be associated with that thing once they come out of it. And I fell into that trap. Like, I'm making a video game now, and I'm kind of like, well, I don't want to lean on what I've done photographically. And is that a mistake? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Should I be saying, well, and I am saying that to a certain extent. I'm an excellent photographer. I clearly know, transferable skills. And I don't want to leave that in the dust and say that, like, that part of me hasn't disappeared because I've taken on something else. Like, and with the languages, like, I'm not second guessing myself because I've made the decision, but sometimes I'm like, 2 years to learn 2 languages when I could be, building grey boxes or photogrammetry or whatever. Like, you sort of, it's like investing in stocks. You're like, is it really the right decision to bank all this for this amount of time? And there's gonna be a nervousness to that. You'd be an idiot not to be nervous about that. You would be a fool, more than an idiot. You would be a fool to not feel some sort of, because you need to be able to pivot if something doesn't work, right? And I think this is the key defining characteristics between those that succeed and those that don't. I think that if you are rigid, you have to be rigid to a certain point, or nothing ever happens. But you need to be able to have that little, like, that 1%, that 2% of you needs to be able to be thinking, really, otherwise you get so far down the road and then it just doesn't work. But I don't believe that's the case with languages. At the end of the day, I completely stand by Denmark and Japan. I think that out of the 2 countries in the world, those are the 2 countries that people should be listening to. I feel like they're the 2 countries that understand self-identity. And, I've been thinking about that as well, where, like China. It's impossible to homogenize China because China is so large. There's nothing you can do to sort of, like, westernize China. But I feel like, the Nordic histories, which are essentially separate, surprisingly, I think that's why they've lasted, like the Nordics, even though they had their colonial streak, which a lot of people like to forget. They colonized England, they colonized the UK, as well as much of France. They did a lot of that, but because it was then overshadowed by the British Empire, and suddenly like the Portuguese and the Portuguese and the Japanese, they sort of like that sort of fell by the wayside in history as well, even though they had very, very powerful maritime empires as well. But like because of that, the Nordics have sort of kept their identity. And I value that, and they're not willing to bend that, not for Trump, not for Islam, and that's fine, because if Korea is allowed to be Korean despite previous Japanese occupation, if Taiwan is allowed to be Taiwan despite China believing what China believes, then why isn't the Nordics allowed to be Nordic? Why isn't Japan allowed to be Japanese? Why must one bend when the others do not? I think there's hypocrisy there, and I think that when we look at the modern world, what has been derived, especially from Japan, the Nordics too, but especially from Japan, what has been derived from Japan has changed the world fundamentally so much for the better, and it's come from them being Japanese. So I think that integrating is the only way. I think that if I want to be a part of Japanese society, I need to integrate fully. And that's a choice that I've made. I've made for sort of, let's call it 10 to 15 years. I made that choice. I made the choice that I did not want to fully integrate into Japan. I made the choice that I am an Englishman and that I did not want to integrate into Japan. So that's been my past 10 to 15 years of my life, despite how much I love the country and having been there and lived there, and much of my world being Japanese or Japanese adjacent. I have now made the choice that to go forward in life, I need to integrate, assimilate into Japan in a proper way, and hope that they accept me. Otherwise, Banshee's not going to have a home, right? I mean, the Nordics are different. The Nordics, like I feel like Denmark is what England should be. I feel like we have a shared history. Our history is interwoven inexplicably. But Denmark are what England should have been, or should be today. So like I don't feel that there's going to be such a cultural disconnect, because I feel like, especially if I'm going into Denmark, the likelihood is that it would be like 70% D. Roberts Photo, 30% Banshee Interactive, whereas in Japan it would be more than likely be like 90% Banshee Interactive and 10% D. Roberts Photo. But I feel like D. Roberts Photo belongs in the Nordics. I think that my complete frameworks can just drag and drop. I can actively pursue the cultural, archaeological side, historical side, even in the academic, technical side, in a way that's respected. Like a lot of massive photographers have come from Denmark, like Thorsten Overgaard. He's a very well respected photographer in terms of the pedagogical side. I would say he's a teacher more than a doer, and that's no slight on him as a photographer, but the fact that in that framework he can attain that sort of reputation makes me believe that I also have a place there. Whereas in Thailand, no matter my achievements, no matter my effort, no matter my output or my outcome, I don't think that there's really a home for D. Roberts Photo in Thailand. I don't really think there's a home for Banshee Interactive in Thailand. There's a cultural disconnect, a corporate cultural disconnect, as well as a base cultural disconnect on the individual level. Whereas in Japan, I think, and I suppose Japan is the antithesis of the the Renaissance man. Japan is that I choose one thing and I do it for 40 years, and then I consider myself, having learned the basics there, and I respect that. I respect the hell out of that. But I think that, like, for me, like, that's where I probably draw the line. I think that I do want to become a Renaissance man if I am not already. And it's not up to me to decide that. It's up to the world to decide that. It's up to me to build the building blocks. It's up to me to build the castle, and then during the siege we find out exactly how well it stands up. Or for another, metaphor, it would be, it's up to me to build the ship. It's only when we set sail do we realise how watertight it is. So let's do that. And that doesn't come in a day. I think that it's silly. I watched Dr. Stone because I kind of like it. There's something about it I think is worthwhile. And like in Dr. Stone, he spends like however many years trying to build this rocket, and I know it's not real, right? It's just entertainment. But this is why I like it as a cartoon, and it teaches youngsters the right thing, because like things do not come overnight. You have to put in that iterative effort to get somewhere, and I think that that's just you just get to a point in time where you come to that decision. And I came to that decision long ago, and I decided no. Right, I've been offered the path to become this, and I've now said yes. But really, this is a dialogue, and it's not reaching people, and I don't really mind that, because I'm not out to reach people right now. I'm out to set my boundaries. I'm declaring, this territory, right, and I'm putting up my borders. This is what I'm doing right now. So I'm not really calling people in, but a time will come where people will come in. But this is one of the things where I would like to open up a discussion on how people feel about the idea of a Renaissance man, and about the idea of a polymath, and where that really exists. Because from what I can tell, it's minimal. In the industry, like, who I respect most right now in the industry is, although like I worship at the altar of Kojima, there is a very distinct, for me at least, there is a very distinct separation between respecting what he has done and what he wants to do. And for me, they're separate things, and I align with one of those things. I don't align with the other, and that's perfectly fine. I'm entitled to that opinion, as he is entitled to do what he wants to do. And that's not downgrading it. I'm just saying, like, I have a different view of what I think the medium should be, and that is great, because if everyone had the same view, you'd be playing the same game, which is exactly how the industry looks today. The other person I have massive respect for is Glenn Schofield. Glenn Schofield is one of the people who seem to consistently deliver exactly what I believe the majority demographic of people in this world, who treat video games as their primary form of entertainment, want. The other person is Amy Hennig. I think Amy Hennig has done more for video games than any other person from the creative side. Obviously, there's technological sides where, like, a lot of people have pushed the technology, and I'm not saying that they are lesser for it. I'm saying from the creative side, Amy Hennig is possibly, in my eyes, probably the person who has done the most for the medium. And all of those people are polymaths. All of those people, they have one solid strength, Hennig being writing, Schofield being vision. So I'm not saying that they don't have a specific strong skill set, just like me. I come from the visual arts, and that is always going to be my primary, that's always going to be my strong arm, that's always going to be my leading foot. But I would like to be able to be a polymath, a polyglot, and a Renaissance man. So, as we always say here, this is Banshee Interactive. I'm David Roberts, and remember, this is not a simulation.